Welcome to Maritime Matters, a podcast focused on leaders in the maritime market, the people, the companies, the technologies that are making and breaking the news, helping to lead the maritime industry to a safer, more efficient, more profitable, and cleaner future. Welcome aboard.
The world is constantly moving forward. At Crowley, we understand that more than anyone because movement is in our DNA. We carry the things people need across thousands of touch points and oceans of data. We carry the food that feeds nations. We carry the life-saving medicine people rely on. We carry the fuel, the products, the millions of things people need to do their work and live their lives. And it's not just physical things we carry. We also carry ideas forward. We carry ambitions forward. We carry technology forward. We solve the massive problems no one else can handle because of the unique combination of ingenuity, experience, and scale no one else has. At Crowley, we don't just carry things, we carry the things that carry the world forward.
This is Greg Troutwine with the Maritime Matters, the Marinelink Podcast, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Megan Davidson, Chief People and Regulatory Officer, and Jim Bender, Program Manager, Workforce Development for Crowley, to discuss this legacy, multifaceted U.S. maritime and logistics company and explore its cumulative efforts across the board to attract and retain the staff, the mariners it needs to power its future. So Megan and Jim, welcome to Maritime Matters.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So, in my opening, I briefly framed the discussion on workforce development as a background. I've been the editor of Maritime Reporter and Engineering News since 1992, which gives me a nearly 33-year wide window of view into the global maritime sector. Maritime recruitment certainly is not my area of expertise, but I can say unequivocally that over the past 5 to 10 years, the conversation, the noise, the emphasis on building and maintaining workforce for ship and boat owners, for ship and boat builders, and really for every facet of maritime and logistics has grown louder and more pronounced every year. But to start us off, can you both give a short introductions of yourself, a brief career overview, and insights on your responsibilities today at Crowley?
Absolutely. So I'll get started if that's okay with you, Jim. So Greg, as you mentioned, I'm the Chief People and Regulatory Officer for Crowley. I joined about 3 years ago, and wow, you got thrown into the mariner shortage, so, trial by fire. But right now I oversee both human resources and labor relations, as well as legal, marketing and communications, and then HSSE, including sustainability. Prior to joining Crowley, I worked at a couple of multinational companies, both in oil and gas and financial services. And so I come with about 20 years experience. So I know recruiting, but shipping has been quite the learning curve.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Greg, good to be with you today. I've actually been at Crowley's for less time. I've been here for 2 years and spent many years prior to this in higher education, as I was the Vice President and Chief Advancement Officer for a university in Minnesota. I've also have experience in my background working for a Fortune 50 company where I oversaw their government and community partnership efforts across the globe. I currently oversee community impact and our workforce development strategies, really focusing on how we help not only our business units, but our employees and our company as a whole engage our employees in giving back through volunteerism, but also trying to figure out how we find those strategic partners that we need to engage with to ensure that we have a solid workforce pipeline for the future.
Okay, well, Megan, first and foremost, hats off to you for diving into the maritime industry in what was the worst maritime or mariner crisis that I've ever seen. I'd like to dive into Crowley. And Crowley is obviously one of the truest pure U.S. maritime plays, founded by Thomas Crowley in 1892 with that famous purchase of a single 18-foot Whitehall boat to provide transportation, personnel, and supplies to ships anchored in San Francisco Bay. The company today obviously has evolved mightily. So either of you, can you provide a by the numbers look at the organization today? Really something that provides those watching, those listening, those reading with guidance on the size, the depth, the breadth of the company.
Absolutely, Greg. Yeah, Crowley, I mean, has such a rich history, and it's been exciting to hear Tom talk about his father and grandfather and how the company has evolved. But Crowley, so first of all, I mean, we are a multinational company. We are a regional player, mostly in the United States and Central America, but we do operate in 36 countries and island territories. We have 5 business units, most known for shipping, but also logistics, land transportation, fuels, which is based up in Alaska, and then Crowley Wind Services. We employ, between Crowley and our joint ventures, we employ about 7,000 employees. And we are the largest, between Crowley and our joint venture, we are the largest employer of mariners in the nation. We have about 12,000 customers across those 5 business units. And then we get into the assets, and this is really exciting. So we have 170 vessels, roughly, that we either manage, own, or affiliated with through our joint ventures. We have 45,000 container equipment fleets. And then we, on our land transportation side, we move about 3,500 freight transportation moves a day. So overall, just kind of to give you a sense of going back to like the clients, we work with about 20% of Fortune 500 companies. So our scope is fairly expansive.
Then my assessment that you've grown mightily from an 18-foot boat is accurate, and I'm happy I'm not spreading any vicious rumors here.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. So, and again, over the years I've had the pleasure of interviewing Tom Crowley many times, and I've heard the story. I've been in your offices. I've seen the memorials to his family and the business. The last time I was there, though, was actually interesting because I had a really interesting interview with your CIO, Erica Graziuso. Now that's probably about a year and a half ago or so. And from my side, it was really a great interview, as she comes obviously from the IT background, and obviously, digitalization trend in maritime is deep, it's ongoing, and it's got some very long legs. One of the things that really stood out for me, and I'm seeing this played out across a swath of maritime companies, large and small, was her lack of previous maritime experience. And we have talked about that years collectively as an industry, about taking the best minds and practices from other industries. So my long-winded question there is, what are the mega trends that you see today that are driving Crowley's business and that are fundamentally changing the types of workers that you seek, the ones that you seek to attract and the ones you seek to obviously retain?
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Take that, Jim?
Yeah, I'll start. We'll see. You talk about the people that are coming into the industry, and I'm actually one of those, like Erica too, where I come from a non-traditional background, that don't come from the maritime industry. And so I think one of the things that strikes me is that this is about attracting the brightest and the best to join us. And I think that brings incredible breadth and of knowledge to our industry. And it really gives us an opportunity to partner them with others in our company to teach that company-specific information that's so important. I think that helps to develop the culture also. You're bringing in that great knowledge, great outside opinions, if you will, about how things can be done, and then combining that with people that have that institutional knowledge can be a real powerful thing. At least I believe it is.
Okay. Megan, did you want to add anything to that as well?
Yeah, I was just, as we think about, who we attract and who we retain, for me, I feel like there's so many transferable skills across industries. What comes to mind is some of like the changes in technology, just the pace of change in society, whether it's, political, environmental, how the different generations, I think, look at, their careers. And so, what I think we're tending to look for are people who, have a level of tech savviness, that have a high learning agility, also who are like open to change and nimble. And sometimes that is equally, if not more important than the technical capability, as a HR professional or as a operational professional. I think that's really important. But overall, I do feel like people are looking for, a company with purpose, a purpose-driven organization. They're looking for a strong culture. People still are looking for flexibility that the pandemic brought, as well as, how are we innovating and using technology and so forth. So, that really, I think, spans all of the areas that we in particular hire for.
No, I mean it's fascinating, and again, I take to heart your comment on the pace of change, because to put it in perspective, when I started here in 1992, there was no internet, there was no email. Everything that we did was on paper, and when I say that to my sons today, who are 28 and 26, their head kind of spins and they think I'm as old as dirt, which is increasingly true. But I do. I love it because increasingly, obviously, and I do see the pace of change going. It just seems like it's picking up faster. I mean, just look at our business of information. That truly makes my head spin, and I like working with organizations. Increasingly, I find myself in rooms with people who are my son's age. And when I relay to them some of the stories of how we produced publications, information back then, it makes their head spin. And I said, look, that it is crazy. I said, but what really blows my mind is what this is all going to look like in 30 years from now.
Right.
So it's an endless conversation. So obviously, you're a traditional maritime company or a logistics company. You have certain skills and certain skill sets. You're bringing in new people as well. So when you look at your available recruitment tools in your tool belt, from your experience, for who you're looking to hire, which ones work best, which ones not so well?
Yeah. So I'll touch on that, but I think really Jim's expertise is key. So as far as the tools, there's a couple that we really depend on that are important. One is just the applicant tracking system, and that allows us to understand where we're finding candidates and where they're falling out in the process, I guess I should say, and why. It allows us to develop better recruiting or sourcing efforts, better tools, as part of the tools, like how we leverage the data analytics and the insights has been really important to us for all the reasons that I just mentioned. And then one thing we're particularly excited about, and we've tested it and we are working on rolling it out, is a lot of people don't understand the industry. They don't know what the jobs mean and what that looks like for them. And so we're rolling out a CRM tool where people can express interest in learning more about Crowley, about the industry, and hearing more about jobs. Because, recruiting is really about the match. It's about them finding a role in a culture in a company that works for them, and us finding the same in an employee. So I love the idea that that's what we're moving towards, is people can get more insight before going through the whole process and investing all that time and energy to find out that maybe it's not a fit for them. And similar to us, we get to experience, candidates beforehand.
How we engage with other partners in the community, nonprofits that can help us get in and start telling the story of logistics, transportation, shipping to kids. As we worked with some of these partners, we started doing very unscientific studies and found that 1 in 10 students that we talked to understood what the word logistics meant, and less than that had even a clue of what kind of job they could get in the industry. when I heard that, I thought, well, that was me before 2 years ago, probably. But I thought we have a job to do in this industry to tell young people, these are the type of jobs you do. This is how you get into them. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to really look for ways to enter that ecosystem, if you will, start sharing this with kids. And I would say early in elementary school, start opening up that aperture wide so they can start thinking of the different possibilities that are there. And as they continue through the ecosystem, being able to give them experiential learning opportunities so they can try it out. I always hate when organizations say, well, we're just going to hope that we're able to find the right people when they're older. And I'd rather not hope for anything, especially when we look at the shortages that we're going to be facing in transportation and logistics in the future. I'd rather that we be real intentional and start working early to try to woo these kids into our industry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say those observations really hit home. They truly do, because I actually live in New York. I've lived here my entire adult life. But I grew up just north of Cincinnati. I grew up just north of the Ohio River, and I couldn't have told you one thing about the maritime industry growing up. I never thought about it. I never thought about it as a career. And what I've always said is, basically when it hits the mainstream media, when maritime hits the mainstream media, something has gone wrong. I've been involved loosely in that next generation as well. And I mean, I've done a lot of different things, from judging competitions. I remember when my oldest son was in kindergarten, I took in a box of Theodore Tugboat coloring books, which I don't even know if Theodore Tugboat's still a thing anymore. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. And I had lines, and I had a wheel from a vessel. And but obviously the kids went gaga when they saw the little Tugboat chocolate lollipops that I had. From the Crowley perspective, and again, I just want to dig a little bit deeper in getting how the organization gets involved on that young student level. Can you just give me either a broad overview or a couple anecdotal kind of insights as to what you do to kind of get in with the youth at a very young age?
It's easy to tell people to get involved. Anyone can go to a school and talk about their career, but what Jim and our VP of talent have really done is do that in a very methodical way. And it gives me chills, because it's like, I think the team is making an impact in how they're doing it. But it's done in a way where we are creating an ecosystem. So Jim can give some examples of how we're doing that, and how our employees are getting involved. But it really is exciting to hear him talk about it.
Yeah, I find it really exciting, and I have 9 grandkids that I try it out on. So I have a built-in audience, Greg. As I've looked at the problem that we've had, and I think as my vice president and I talked about it, we really said, we believe that getting in front of kids as young as possible is important. We've heard people for years say kids can't be what they can't see. Well, they can't be what they haven't even heard of either, I would propose to you as well. So we start with one of our partners, Junior Achievement, and they were able to get us into classrooms. And believe it or not, we started in kindergarten and first grade, and we had some remarkable employees that wrote a children's book, and it was entitled, "Where Are You Going, Big Blue Truck?" It's a little 4x4 cardboard book, and we're able to bring this in, and we have groups of employees in our various business resource groups that go into classrooms, and they sign up, and they come in, and then they read this book to the children, and then they give a copy of each one of this book to each one of the kids. And it almost broke our hearts. We were finding that many of these kids that were getting the books, number one, it was the first book they ever had that was their own, that they could take home. Number two, many of these kids English was not their first language, so it was the first book they were getting to learn to read in English going through. We've expanded that as we get into elementary school, and we brought in other books at higher levels. We brought in guest speakers where we put together speaker panels. And these are with kids as you get into those late years in elementary school or in middle school, really talking about what are the various opportunities in our industry. What are things that might really excite you? And it's fascinating to watch the kids respond to various things. For some of them, it may be how we move freight. Others, it might be how they would go out on a vessel and be sailing for 6 weeks. And we had one little guy that was in a class and we couldn't shut him down. I'm sure he's going to be on our vessel here soon. So that was one of the other pieces, but then really also partnering with Junior Achievement and Boys and Girls Club to continue repetitively sharing about our industry and then finding opportunities to give those experiential learning opportunities. So if you think of things like bringing groups of kids from your local Boys and Girls Club down to our terminal to see one of our vessels being loaded, to actually go up and see what a vessel looks like. It could be something like us having them go out and look at what a warehouse is like. Pretty fun to see kids get jazzed up when they see a forklift running around. So I think that's so important. And then probably at the end of the ecosystem, before you launch them out of it, it's determining how we take all those things that they've learned and thought of experiencing and then making that real for them. And we do that by helping them get to a maritime academy or a maritime training program, or maybe it's they need to go to our local community college because they want to be a welder, they want to be a plumber, a pipe fitter. And so I think it's about us really thinking holistically about how do we show each one of the different pathways a student can pursue, and then how do we help them get there. So it's really taking something that would seem transactional. I apply for a job, I do a resume, I do an interview, and they give me a job, to make it more relational as we help the kids down that path.
Yeah, and I have a copy of this book, so you can see it, Greg. Super cute.
That's awesome. I'll look for my copy in the mail. That's excellent. And I'm sure with a lot of little ones running around a port or a logistics facility, this gives you a new impetus to reiterate your safety conversation again and again. And Jim, I would digress and say that with 9 grandchildren, you don't have an audience, you have a tugboat crew. So,
I do, and at least one of them really wants to be on a vessel bad. So
that's awesome.
I've got one in training.
No, that's truly amazing. So, obviously, there's been a change of administration, and there's a lot of new directives. And to me, it's irrelevant of administration, but it just seems the political winds when there is a change at the top. Corporate leaders increasingly must deal with increasingly volatile swings in directions and directives and new administrations and what those priorities are. I've seen it a million times. I even had this conversation with another CEO friend of mine recently, and I said, look, is it my imagination, or is it just becoming much more, the swings are getting wider, and they're like, no, they have. So with that as a backdrop, how do current political winds, or political winds in general, most notably, recently, obviously, putting the clamps on things like ESG and diversity directives, how does this impact your recruitment efforts?
Absolutely. So, I will say, one, we're definitely more actively monitoring what's coming out of Washington and just trying to get more clarity around what some of the executive orders mean. Probably I couldn't say this the first week, but now I'm thinking about this more in a positive. I feel like the uncertainty and the swing have really helped us sharpen our focus. Whether it is ESG or DE&I, in the end, it allows us to say what's really important to our culture, what's really important to attract talent, what's really important for business continuity and for us to continue to grow. And just, if I think of DE&I, one of the outputs, I think, to this has been a realization that we still have a shortage, particularly if we're talking about mariner shortage or, our truck drivers. And the way that we are going to ensure that we have talent for the future is on workforce development, and Jim talked about that. And that still means that we have to go into, for example, underrepresented communities, and we have to attract different and additional talent than what we're attracting now. And so we need to have, whether it's benefits or the culture, to do so. So that largely remains unchanged regardless of an executive order. Is we still need to engage with big brothers and big sisters and Boys and Girls Club, and make sure that we're attracting talents that, again, maybe aren't sailing right now, females or more people of color. So I think it helps us prioritize what we're doing. Additionally, I think from a leadership and a team effectiveness perspective, as a company, we succeed by having teams that are creative and innovative, and that comes from feeling psychological safety, from trusting one another, and our success depends on people bringing their different perspectives. So what this change, in the administration has really allowed us to do is, how do we still accomplish that? How can we get more focused on that? We don't need to, maybe, we're thinking about it and doing 10 different things. What's really going to be impactful? And how do we do it, ensuring that we stay in compliant with the law and the order and so on? So I think it's just generated a lot of great conversation on how do we still go out and recruit, and what is still needed to make sure that people want to join Crowley and join our culture. So I think we're all looking as an opportunity to get better. In the end, I think it's actually going to make us stronger.
Obviously, maritime is a specific sector with many specific skill sets, and we've already discussed a few of them. And I remember talking to one of my friends down at a shipyard in the Gulf of Mexico, and we were talking about their recruitment needs, and specifically he was talking about welders and fitters, and he was just relating to me the difficulty of keeping employees who might hop to another company for what really would be a very minimal pay raise. So that's kind of a long-winded preamble, but I guess how prevalent is, and I don't want to put it as poaching necessarily, but like when you look, it is still a relatively small pool of talent. That talent might work for another company. How prevalent is it for you to attract people from other companies, or other companies to attract your employees?
Yeah. I would say, when you think about attracting people from other companies, if I think of within the shipping industry, obviously there are niche skill sets required. I have been pleasantly surprised, when I joined 3 years ago, at the height of, I would say, the shortage, and there was just a lot of conversation amongst the stakeholders, and there are many, about how to solve it. I never felt at any time that it was, okay, we're gonna, in the short term, take from another operator. It was more about how do we work together. So I think, one, personally, Crowley is such a strong culture that people who tend to come here to work stay here. But additionally, I have been floored at, I've sat on panels where we have different operators participating, in addition to some of the union leadership, as well as some of the government agencies. And I think it's been almost a team approach to, there's still short-term issues, but in the long term, how are we creating an industry, both educating people of the industry, but creating an industry that has a culture and has great opportunities, different experiences, also, the right benefits, the right pay. And how do we make it and show people that it's so exciting, because it is. So I don't think that poaching really hasn't been top of mind for us at Crowley, and it's really been, how do we support the industry, and how do we lead the industry in solving this problem?
I probably would add also that I think that the creation of culture is, in my mind, just absolutely key for our company, for recruiting and retaining. And I see us doing that a lot in the ways that we provide opportunities for our employees to get involved in what we call corporate citizenship. Our company is intentional about giving volunteer time off for our employees to get involved and invested in the communities where they work or where they live. And that's something that I think is very attractive to them. And I think all you have to do is look at our numbers. Our employees donated over 12,000 hours of their time to serve in volunteer capacities, whether it's with Boys and Girls Club or Junior Achievement or going out in the community cleaning up. And they impacted over 9,000 community members from Central America to Alaska. And I really think there's something about that our company provides that is that secret sauce that helps employees want to stay here. They know that this is not just a job to us, but it's about giving back to the community. And I think as you think about the new generation of employees that we're bringing in, studies show over and over and over that this new generation of employee wants to know that what they're doing is significant and makes a difference. So being a company that allows them to do that is really important.
It's truly amazing. And again, there are a lot of companies that talk the talk, and Crowley obviously walks the walk. And it's kind of a perfect segue to the next kind of line of question that I wanted to kind of get into. As I said from the outset, I've had the opportunity to interview Tom Crowley several times, and I distinctly remember the first time because I was down in your Jacksonville office. I walked in, I filled out, I was handed my safety brochure, I signed in, and I sat down to wait. And lo and behold, Tom Crowley comes down and greets me personally. And I mean, believe me, I've done this a long time. I've traveled the world. I've gone to companies large, small, and every place in between. But that to me is that's a small gesture, but it has a huge impact because that points to culture, that points to a Crowley culture. And that honestly is a culture that I've seen throughout over the years that I've had the opportunity to work with your organization. So, with that kind of as a backdrop and with what you just said, Jim, what do you see as the keys, I guess the top factors to attract and retain the people that you want in the need, the people that will embrace, utilize, extend, and add to that Crowley culture?
Yeah, and I'll take this and then Jim add. But I mean, Greg, you said it. The tone starts at the top, and Tom exhibits, I think, the culture that he wants to continue to see and we want to continue to strengthen. A part of me thinks it comes from, what's important to attract and retain starts from transparency about what we are and what we aren't as a company. Because again, as recruiting is all about, two sides are coming together and it's got to be mutual. And so just being transparent about what we stand for and what we expect. And, when I think of our values, we have 3 values: drive, safety, and integrity. And I go to integrity and safety top of mind, where we want to ensure people understand that is critical to us as an organization. And we want people who want to also live that as we do. So I think the transparency around, this is how we operate, this is what we think is important, which again speaks to the culture. So that is important for us to attract talent and for talent to stay. I go to safety, physical and psychological safety. I think of people feeling like they're treated fairly. I think, are we showing them dignity that they deserve, whether that's on a vessel, whether that's in the office. And in the end, it does all come down to integrity. I know I previously just mentioned we have to offer, whether it's compensation or benefits or the interesting type of work that people want to stay. And that's really important. We tend to talk about that and look at that quite a bit. That doesn't mean we always get it right, but it is kind of constant dialogue, I think, at all levels of the organization of kind of how are we doing relative to that and how do we keep improving.
Jim, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, when Megan was talking about Tom, I was thinking just here a couple of weeks ago, something had happened. I can't even remember what it was. And I had said to him, I said, "Aren't you proud of your company?" And he stopped me right there. He said, "I'm proud of our company." And as I thought about it, I thought, that is not only Tom, but that's our senior leadership team. That's everyone around here. This is our company. And I think that's how people look at it.
Yeah,
there is truly an ownership here that's unique.
I mean, it is. It's a fascinating story. And again, it's interesting. Like I said, I live on the South Shore of Long Island. So, we have a vast expanse of water. I take advantage of it. We're out on our boats. We're in the marina. I can't walk out my front door and throw a stick without hitting the house of a kid who has gone or is going to a maritime academy. So invariably, the conversations about maritime come up more often than you would probably think. And again, this kind of goes back to the whole character and the culture. I mean, I forget exactly Tom's age when he took the helm when his father passed, but I do remember he was in his 20s, and that always impressed me of a young man taking responsibility for a company that large at the time. Because if it had been me in my 20s, I would have driven it straight into the abyss and probably lived to call another day. So I agree with you 1,000%. Like I said, I've seen it multiple times over the years, with pretty much everyone I've dealt in the Crowley organization. So you both have been very kind with your time. I truly appreciate it. I just had one more question. You both obviously come from non-maritime backgrounds. So when you look at maritime, when you look at your job in recruiting maritime and logistics professionals to power your business, what do you consider the greatest challenges? And also, how is recruiting in maritime materially different, or is it, from the other markets that you've served?
Yeah. Maybe I'll start and let
Yeah,
you finish.
yeah.
I think a couple of things. Recruiting for maritime is especially challenging because of the qualifications, the certifications that are required. Specifically, if we think about our mariners, our folks that are out at sea, and the different certifications they have to get, the sea time they have to get, such a long runway for them to be to the point that they're able to get on a vessel. So when you think about the MARAD report that was done back in 2017 that talked about 1,800 plus mariner shortage here in the U.S. Near time, and you start thinking, how do we fill those gaps in a short amount of time? People aren't going to be getting on vessels for 18 to 24 months if they start right now. So I think it shows us what a daunting challenge that we have for that. That's probably the biggest one that I think of.
Yeah, and I think in addition to the timing too, it's cost prohibitive. It is, you're not working, or you may be working at a lower level until you get credentialed, if we're talking about, our mariners. And so how do we, again, make it as attractive as we can so they'll stay through the process? The other thing I would just add, and again, this is more so for our mariners, but how interesting. You're living on a vessel for, half of the year. And personally, I get seasick, so I can't even imagine that. But it's not everyone is cut out for that. And so to try to find people that are interested in that, I think in general, though, all of our businesses, and I did not realize this till the pandemic, but we are shipping, we are transporting goods that people need, that makes people's lives easier. And so it's 24/7, and not that people are working 7 days a week or 24 hours a day, but I think that is different than many other industries. Obviously, there's some, that would equally say they have the same challenges. But I think it just takes a different type of person to appreciate and understand and be willing to make that commitment that other industries just don't have.
Megan, if nothing else, you gave me the perfect headline for this. The seasick recruiter takes the helm at Crowley Maritime. It's all good. It's all good. I'm always looking for those little cues. So both of you, I truly appreciate your time. Again, it's like I said, obviously I've had multiple touches with Crowley over the years, but it truly is a pleasure to take a deep dive into it. Everybody's busy these days. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you for listening to Maritime Matters. If you would like to be featured on a future Maritime Matters podcast, visit www.marinelink.com or email maritimematters@marinelink.com.